Hello friends, welcome to my channel. Today is the day 18 for our PCNSA series. So in this video, we are going to talk about dynamic NAT as well as PAT. So in my previous video, I have covered about static NAT. If you have not watched my previous video, I'll recommend you to please watch. Okay. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the source dynamic NAT. What exactly it is, why we use source dynamic NAT, what is PAT, port address translation, and why we are using it. We'll try to understand. And also we are going to see the source dynamic NAT and the PAT in practical lab. This is real-time configuration and real-time explanation that I'm going to give you guys. So I'll request you to please watch this video till the end, and also I recommend you. And I have a request again to please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon so that you never miss any video from me. So without any further delay, let's get started. Hello friends, let's understand what is source dynamic NAT and what is the use of source dynamic NAT in real world. With the help of this particular diagram, we'll understand more. Okay, so let's understand with the scenario. Okay, so you have a range of 192.168.10.0/29. Okay, so how many IP addresses will be getting it? 192.168.10.1 to 192.168.10.6. 7 will be the broadcast and 8 will be the next network, right? Now we have also got from ISP one of the range, something like this. So we have also got the same range kind of thing, right? It is 200.1.1.6. So let's say for an example, you consider this zone as a user zone or application zone or file zone or anything that you want to consider, you can consider that zone itself. Okay. Now whenever this private IP address wants to go to internet, right? So for that reason, they are going to get NAT with this particular pool, right? So for an example, if I consider one, okay. Now this one, whenever they are or they want to move towards the internet or going towards the internet, now we have a firewall and we have defined this particular NAT, dynamic NAT in the firewall. So when they move towards the firewall will assign one of the IP address from this particular range and it will allow it, then the traffic will be going towards internet. Okay. Now this range is basically dynamically assigns to this particular private ranges. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say if 1 is coming, I'll be assigning 1.5. If 10.5 is coming, I'll be assigning 1.2. Right? So it's not fixed that 1 will be assigned to 1, 2 will be assigned to 2, or 3 will be assigned to 3. It is not that way. Okay. So anything can be assigned, like whatever randomly the firewall will choose or NAT device will choose that IP address and it will NAT it and it will send the traffic towards internet. Example can be if this IP is coming. So let's say 10.1 is coming. So firewall will choose one of the IP address and he will say that I'll be assigning 10.4. Okay. Now this will be assigned for temporary purpose. Okay. Now once that time period, now every device has their own time period. Now after that, this mapping will be removed. And let's say for an example, if the user comes back or gets online and once he start accessing the internet, now let's say now he has got, or his IP address is still 1 for an example, next time he'll be getting, let's say 5, or he might get 2, or he might get 3 as well. Okay, so this is for temporary purpose. It is not 100% attached or mapped, or it will be a temporary permanent. No, it is for temporary purpose, and it will be signed for some time, and then after it will be removed from the table. Now let's understand why it is needed. So friends, let's understand what is the use case of source dynamic NAT. Okay, now with the help of this particular diagram, we'll try and understand more about it. Okay, now there are few applications which basically does not work on single port numbers. Like let's say if I take an example of port number as 443, 21, 23, 22. So port numbers, basically the services runs on this particular port number, right? So I will be taking an example of FTP. So FTP has two connections. One is called as control connection and another is called as data connection, right? Now if in the first communication the port number will be used as 21, and there are two types. One is FTP passive connection and active connection. Okay, so I'm not targeting any kind of mode right now, I'm just telling you an explanation, right? So first traffic will be going to port number 21 to establish the control, like they'll be negotiating or they'll be authenticating and all, right? And after that, if data transfer, as this is a file server, so we have to upload a file or download a file. So for that we need a random port number again, right? So we are basically dynamically we are generating port numbers. For that reason we need a dedicated IP address, right? So some of the application basically uses a different port number or random port number during the transactions, right? They will have multiple sessions, they will have multiple ways to send the traffic, sending a acknowledgement packet, or there are some different kind of a structure of an application. So they will not work with any kind of other NAT. Basically if I take an example of PAT, which does a port based translation, basically those app will not work with that, right? And if I take a static NAT, why we are not doing it with the static NAT? Static NAT is basically once you do a mapping, okay, now if you are using the static NAT for every time, then there might be a security concern, because the hacker or the bad person or a bad internet user, they will get to know about your IP address and they'll start penetrating. But in dynamic NAT you will not be able to get to know what kind of IP you are going to use today, right? So dynamic NAT will be helpful for an application as well as for security. So you will be seeing this kind of dynamic NAT in most of the organizations, right? So friends, let's understand what is port address translation and why we use it. With the help of this diagram we'll understand more, but I just wanted to tell you guys that PAT will be used in most of the places. Like right now, if you are at home and if you are using your Wi-Fi connection to see this particular YouTube video, okay, so in this case still your Wi-Fi router is doing PAT, right? ISP is doing PAT. He's giving connection to a lot of users. Like let's say for an example, you have taken an Airtel connection, okay, so in your area there will be multiple Airtel users or subscribers will be there. They will be using Airtel. Now whether they are using the public IP address, no, it is getting NATed at the ISPN and it is going outside towards the internet, right? Same way in organization or in companies, what happens is there will be a lot of user inside the organization, maybe 1000, 1000, 2000 or something like that. So if they want to go out, okay, organization or the companies cannot buy a public IP address for them. So they will allocate a public IP address, okay, for multiple users to go on internet, because on internet they are doing a lot of productivity work, and basically nowadays you can understand all the things are on cloud as well, right? So they have to go internet. It is not that they cannot go, or it's without going internet everything will be everything can be done. They have to go, right? So for them the NAT or the PAT is very much required. Okay, if you see in this particular diagram, the host A and host C, they want to go and try to connect to host B, right? And not host B having a public IP address. So in this case, the source IP address will be changed by this NAT router and changes the port number as well. If you see at the start, the source port number was something else, and the NAT device has changed this particular port number to some other port number. So it's doing some port based translation, and it basically have this particular record, so that whenever the return traffic comes, it checks the port number and map this particular port number so that it can send to a correct host, right? Now if there is no PAT, the users will no longer go to internet, even we will not get internet access. So PAT is most important thing, and even if we are going out of IP address for IPv4, that is the reason the PAT is basically helping us to use IPv4 still, because IPv4 is PAT is basically converging, or basically. So friends, let's hit the lab and we'll try to configure source dynamic NAT and PAT. Okay, so let's move on to the lab now. So this is our lab. We have used this same IP schema or the same lab for static NAT as well. Okay, so what we are going to do in this particular lab today is we are going to do dynamic NAT, right? So dynamic NAT, from this particular pool, so we have a pool of 172.29.129.0/24. So I'll be taking one of the pool from this. So I have planned to take 29.129, 152, 172, 24, 129, 160. So this is the range of a public IP address I'm going to choose, and from this I'll be using the same range of IP address as well. So 10.150 towards 10.160. So I have this range and I'll be NATing to this particular public range. So let's configure this one and let's see how it goes and how the NATing is happening. Okay, so friends, one more information I just wanted to give you, that I have configured this one as inside zone, this one as a outside zone, and I have already configured the IP addresses already. In my previous lab also, or previous video as well, I have already configured the IP address and the zones as well. If you want to know how to configure it, I will help you, or you can find that particular video in I button. Okay, I'll link that video, or you can check the description box as well. Okay, so let's go to the dashboard. This is the dashboard of Palo Alto firewall. Let me show you that I have already configured the IP addresses, okay, the zones and all. Let's move on to the policy and we'll try to configure the NAT policy first. Okay, so this is a dynamic source NAT. So we'll just type dynamic source NAT, right? So let me just put a hyphen over here. So source will be our inside, okay, destination would be outside, okay, Now I have to define the source range over here. So let's define the source range. 192.168, I guess it is 10.150 if I am correct, 10.0, yeah. And I have a range which is 192.168, 10.160, right? So this is the range that I have defined, 150 to 160, right? Now destination, I'm going somewhere like on internet. I can go to any of the IP address, so I'm not defining any destination. Let's configure the translated IP address as a dynamic. So I have to put a translation IP address, which is nothing but 172.129.29.150 hyphen 192, sorry 172.129.29.160. if I am correct, 29.120. okay, I have just missed it. So it is 29 and then 129, and this is 29 and 129, right? So this is the IP address that I am doing. So if you see here, 10, 150, 160, 150, 160. So I have defined 10 IP over there and 10 IP over here. Not 10, it is basically 11, starting from 150, right? So if we have defined the translated IP address, okay. Now here is the thing, one little information that I wanted to give you, okay. Let's say you have a pull. It is not like, let's say you have a pull of 5 IP address, okay, and in the source or in the original packet you have 10 IP address. So the pull will not support it, right? So pull is having only 5 IP address, but you have 10 IP address which is coming, and basically we have to perform the NAT. Now we can have a fallback plan as well. So if this 5 IPs are getting exhausted, in that particular case, what you can do is you can configure a PAT. So whatever the remaining 5 IP address that you are having, you can do a translation. Basically you are doing a port based translation. So you are doing PAT for it. Either you can go for interface NATing, or you can define a specific IP address for it. So this is just a fallback plan, okay. It's not that you have to configure and you have to do it. If you are short of IP address, in that case you can have a fallback plan, otherwise it is not needed, right? We have 10 as in the source address, and we have in a public IP address we have 10 as well. So here it is not required, right? Or 11, sorry for that, okay. Now we'll create a security policy again. So let's create a security policy. So this is for dynamic NAT rule, okay. My source would be inside, and my source address will be 192.168.10.150, 192.168 10.160, right? This is my range, and this will be my IP address. Now destination, I'll be choosing outside, and destination will be anything. Application, source, and everything will be remains the same. Let's commit this, and meanwhile we'll try to log in through PuTTY to check whether NATing is getting performed properly or not, right? So 202.143, open. Okay, we'll just put the password, okay, and let's change the screen to 14, okay, apply, and let's go to this particular PC. As this PC has a different IP address, we have to change the IP address over here. So let's do that, okay. So let's change the adapter IP address. Let's put this one as 155, okay, 55, okay. 10.155. Close it, closing this. I guess we have got internet now. Let's try to access some of the URLs and we'll see whether how it is getting translated. We'll see that. Okay, so let's try to access google.com, right? So it is taking time. Meanwhile, just try to access Facebook as well. As we can see, the Facebook is basically working here, transferring the data. It will slower because of the switch that we are having. So session all, right? So once we do the session all, if you try to compare this one, now 10.55 has got 160, right? So if you see, the source is getting translated, okay, and he has, or randomly, the firewall has randomly assigned the last IP address, right, to 155. If I am coming with another IP address, so let's try to say change adapter settings. I'll be going to properties, IPv4. I'll just make it as 154, right? Okay, close. Okay, now let's try to refresh the Facebook and let's try to refresh the Twitter. Let's try to go to www.reddit. Let's say if I go to Reddit. Okay, now let's try to check. Now if you see, 54 is getting translated with 151. So dynamically it is getting assigned to some other IP address, but here the ports remains the same. Okay, so this is how a dynamic configuration works over here. Okay, so it's very easy to configure and easy to understand as well. So let's do pat. Okay, so let's edit the NAT statement first. Okay, so let's edit this and we'll make it as pat, right? Now this time I will just put the whole range 192.168.10.0/24. So whole range, right? Now we have translated IP address. Now in this particular case I am going for dynamic IP and port number, right? So in this case we have two options. Either I can define a translated address or I can go for interface address translation. Okay, most of the time if you are, let's say for an example, by default /30 range will be given by ISP. So one will be at your end and one will be at ISP end, right? So in this particular public IP address, one will be used here, one will be used here. So this is your premise, this is ISP premises. Okay, so in this case you can basically go and do the interface based translation. But if you have /29 which you have got from ISP, if you want to use one of the IP address from this particular range, then in that case you can use for translation IP address. So in that case you can use translated address, right? Now in translated address, interface address, we have to select the IP interface which is connected to internet, right? So we can connect, or right now we are connected through this interface. Okay, now as you can see here, it is not getting the IP address. It is basically not retrieving the IP address from that interface. It is not like that. Basically what is happening here is this interface is configured in the DHCP mode. Now in DHCP mode, if he selects the IP address, next time he gets a new IP address, then in that case this will not get updated because we'll commit this configuration. So that is the reason if it is in DHCP mode, it will be in the none. If it has a static IP address, the IP address will appear here. Okay, and don't think that it will not work. It will work without any issue. I'll show you. Okay, so let's try that. Now I'll just show you what is the IP address over here, so that when the translation happens, you can verify that. So it is 191. Okay, let's go to policy. We have created a NAT policy. Let's create a security policy. We just need to edit that security policy, that's all. So it's a PAT rule. Okay, now source remains the same, and I'll just make it as 192.168.10.0/24. right? Now destination remains the same, everything remains the same. Let's commit this, and I'll just change the IP address over here. So I'll just go here and do a little bit of change. So I'll go to properties, IPv4, and I'll just made it as 10.15 for an example. Okay, so let's okay, and close it. Okay, let's see whether the commit has been completed. It's not completed. It is going to be completed now. So let's try to refresh this. Okay, this committed successfully. Let's try to refresh the pages. Let's try to refresh the pages. Let's try to refresh the page. Okay, now I'll just go down a little bit. It's been completed now. Okay, let's try again. Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit. Now if you go to translation, so now as you can see, Facebook base and other things, web browsing, now you can see 1015 is getting translated to 191, which I showed you that if you go to network and if you go to dynamic, 191, right? So it is getting translated to 191, which is an interface, right? And here if you see the port number, which is 49,000, this it is getting translated to, so the port is also getting translated over here. Okay, so as you can see how easy to configure a dynamic NAT and PAT in Palo Alto firewall. So try to configure this particular lab, okay, and let me know if you are facing any kind of issue. Guys, this is what I wanted to cover in this particular video. There are so many other video which is coming on. There are different topics, so I will request you to please subscribe my channel and hit the bell icon so that you never miss any video from me. Okay, thank you so much for watching this video till the end. If you have any suggestion related to my video, you can reach out to me on social media. My social media handles are there in about section. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next. Thank you.